This happened 2 years ago, when I was a senior in high school. It was a Saturday night and my friends and I were hanging out at my place. At around 11:30, my two friends, who I will call Mike and Steve, said that they were ready to go back home. Neither of them had a car at the time, so I had to drive them back home, which I had done several times before. I always dropped off Mike first because he lived further away. However, getting to Mike's house from mine was pretty simple. It was pretty much just a straight shot, then I'd drop off Steve on my way back. That night we were about halfway to Mike's when we hit a red light at an intersection. We were in the middle lane and this silver sedan was pulled up next to us in the right lane, which allowed you to either go straight or turn right. When the light turned green, we both went. The sedan suddenly cut us off, causing me to slam on the brakes. The driver kept going as I laid on the horn, saying to myself, what the F is this guy's problem? We were driving behind the sedan for a little while and eventually ended up at another red light. There was 2 lanes at this intersection, so I pulled up into the left lane so our vehicles were parallel. The driver in the sedan looked to be about our age. He rolled down his window and began flipping us off. At this point I became furious and rolled down my window. Why don't you just learn how to drive, jackass? I started giving him the finger as well. And so did Mike, who was sitting up front. Steve was a pretty chill guy and just sat back and enjoyed the show, as me and Mick was getting into it with the driver. He started asking us if we wanted to fight, which I thought was hilarious since there was 3 of us against 1 of him. The light had finally changed and this time we were in front of him. That's when the intensity of this situation changed completely. The sedan got so close that his bumper was practically touching mine. He also flipped on his high beams and began swerving the car like some kind of lunatic. I was horrified that he would ram into the back of my car, causing us to crash. I started to speed up, hoping to gain some distance, but he tailed me no matter how fast I went. Meanwhile, Mike and Steve were understandably freaking out. This went on for about 2 or 3 minutes. He stayed on our tail and kept swerving. When the shoulder got wider, he quickly sped up, went around us, then veered into our lane, cutting us off for a second time. This guy was insane. I slammed on the brakes, going about 50 miles per hour. I still don't know how I managed to miss him, as I pulled over, sped off down the road and actually cut someone else off at the next intersection. But after that he disappeared, and the 3 of us were pretty shaken up. That was the first time in my life that I had ever encountered anyone who was that unhinged. It was probably a good thing that we didn't end up fighting, because he would probably be one of those guys who would bite your nose off. Nothing else happened the rest of the way to Mick's. The whole time I looked behind us just to make sure that we weren't being followed. Thankfully, we never saw that guy again. This experience is somewhat amusing to look back on now, but when it was happening it was terrifying at the moment. He could have rammed into us, causing me to lose control of the car and crash. The way that he swerved into our lane indicated that he clearly had no regard for our safety or his own. I've never antagonised another driver like this, since I'd advise you all to avoid doing, cause you never really know if the driver behind the other wheel is a lunatic. This is a very short story what happened a few years ago. This happened when I was 5 years old, and it's one of the only vivid memories I have from that time in my life. My family is originally from Europe, but later immigrated to America. My grandmother would come visit us for about 3 months every year during the summer. But this summer, my grandmother was staying with us and she planned on taking me to the local park near my house. I was waiting in the driveway while she was inside the house gathering up a few things. I then noticed a black car slowly cruising down the street before coming to a stop in front of my driveway. I didn't find it unusual at first. Perhaps they were just using the driveway to turn back around. Then a tall male exited the car and began walking towards me. I just kinda stood there in shock. As he closed in, the man outstretched his arms like he was going to grab me. I remember thinking that he was the boogeyman. I stood there frozen as he came within a few inches of reaching me, but I finally was able to snap out of my trance and back away until I got to the front door. I started to bang on the door heavily to alert my grandmother. I heard the man behind me saying something under his breath before he ran away. My grandmother opened the door. As soon as she did, he backed out of the driveway and sped off down the road. I then told her what just happened, but she was a stubborn woman and didn't believe me. But looking back, I don't blame her. I was known for having quite the imagination, but this was not one of those instances where I was making something up for attention. Now that I'm older, the situation frightens me even more. That some random stranger pulled into our driveway and tried to snatch up a child in broad daylight. There are only a few moments in your life that will shake you to your core, leaving you completely traumatized. This story is one of them such occurrences. This took place in my home country of India. It was the winter of 2020. I was 19 years old. Due to the ongoing lockdowns that was happening at the time, some of my close friends and I decided to meet up for a small party after discussing it with the group. It was agreed that the party would be held at my best friend's house. Her name was Anita. Anita's mother welcomed us for dinner and a bottle of wine for a Christmassy kind of celebration. Later on, we were watching a movie and having a pretty good time, but Anita's inebriation was becoming noticeable. How could a small amount of wine do that? She must be a major lightweight, I thought. But it turns out that each time she went to use the bathroom, she was secretly drinking some rum. She had kept it hidden, I guess. She didn't want to share with the rest of us. After a while, Anita got a call from her boyfriend and went out to the balcony to talk. Even with the movie sounds, we could hear her cursing violently about something. She then stumbled back into the room and we all looked at her concerned. Anita seemed to be staring at me with a certain look that could almost be described as hatred. But a moment later, that look vanished and she smiled. "Is everything okay, Anita?" She said, "Oh, it's nothing. My boyfriend was supposed to meet me tomorrow, but he won't be able to make it." I said, "That's too bad. Why don't you come and watch the rest of the movie with us?" As we were watching the movie, out of the corner of my eye, Anita was staring at me with the same hateful look. I concluded that she was just drunk. But oh boy, was I wrong. After the movie, she requested that I stay over since I was her best friend. The others left, so now it was just me and Anita. And after some girly conversations, we both went to bed. I don't know how long I had been sleeping for, but I woke up with a searing pain in my left side of my chest. For a moment, I thought I was having a heart attack. I felt my chest and I soon realised that I was bleeding. I had been stabbed. Before I could scream, I need to quickly clamp my mouth. She said to me, "So my piece of shit boyfriend has a thing for you." She said, "I hate you so much." She then raised a knife in her hand for a second time, but this time I blocked it with my hand, resulting in my left palm being stabbed. Thankfully, I am much bigger than Anita, so I pushed her off me with all of my strength and screamed to the top of my lungs. There was a struggle, but I was finally able to subdue her. By that time, her parents were banging on the door. Her father eventually kicked it in and switched on the light. They froze on the spot after they saw me covered in blood. As we waited for the police, the ambulance and my parents to come, Anita was completely insane and began screaming. Unbeknown to me, Anita was diagnosed with schizophrenia and had to be placed on strong medications. In India, mental health disorders are still a taboo topic, so many of her family members never told anyone about her condition, which is severely irresponsible. She was not convicted of the crime because of her condition, but she was sent to an institution for testing and treatment. As for me, the knife had just missed my heart by only a few inches, and I stayed in the hospital for about a week. It took nearly 2 months to fully recover. I still get nightmares about what happened, and I've never gone to sleep over since that night.